A stray dog was running wildly with a bone in its mouth, but it accidentally bumped into a passerby. Its only lunch was knocked out of its mouth. If it couldn't find it, the dog would go hungry again. Just as it was about to go look for it, a group of soldiers happened to be passing by. The bread in the woman's mouth made the dog's mouth water. New recruit Robert spotted it immediately in the crowd. He knew the dog must be starving, so he pulled out a cookie from his pocket and threw it to the dog. The dog devoured the cookie without hesitation, but one cookie was far from enough to fill its stomach. The dog quickly followed the military unit, thinking that if it followed Robert, it would have something to eat. However, it was this unintentional act by the dog that led to its legendary life. This is a true story. In the end, it not only received countless medals of honor, but also became the dog with the highest military rank in the world. But the beginning of a great story is always full of twists and turns. The dog followed the soldiers to the gate of the military camp, but was stopped by two soldiers on guard duty. The dog had no choice but to turn around and leave, but it did not give up. The clever dog found a crack in the wall, and saw Robert training inside. The dog excitedly ran over, dug a hole, and successfully crawled through the crack into the camp. As soon as it arrived at the military camp, the dog was attracted by the large ribs in the kitchen. However, the chef was not happy about this, and immediately chased the dog away. The dog ran out of the kitchen in a panic, and bumped into a soldier's leg. Upon closer inspection, the soldier who had been knocked down was the person it was looking for. This coincidence made the dog very happy. Robert motioned for the dog to leave, but the dog accidentally barked. The dog's bark immediately caught the instructor's attention. The instructor asked the soldier whose dog it was. The dog seemed to understand the instructor's question. It immediately looked at Robert. Robert panicked as he avoided the dog's gaze. He hurriedly signaled the dog to leave. To Robert's surprise, the instructor did not chase the dog away. Instead, he told him to take good care of the dog. Immediately after the instructor gave the command, the dog also learned to stand at attention like a soldier. Seeing such an interesting dog, even the instructor couldn't help but laugh out loud. And so, the dog and Robert began their military camp life. Every day the dog would follow the main force in training. However, at first, it still couldn't tell left from right. But as time went by, the dog slowly began to enjoy it. No matter what command the instructor gave, it was always able to perform the corresponding action excellently. During regular training, the dog didn't lag behind the other soldiers. It was also a reliable assistant. Whenever the soldiers finished their shooting training, the dog would bring the target to the instructor for inspection. Gradually, the dog fully integrated into their lives. Robert even gave it a name, Stubby. With its own name, Stubby spun in circles to express its joy. One day, the general suddenly came to the camp for an inspection. When he saw Stubby, the general angrily rebuked him, saying that this was a military camp, not a zoo, and questioned the dog's origins. This time, Robert did not hesitate. He looked at the general with determination and replied that it was his dog. After saying this, Robert saluted. Stubby saw Robert's action, and saluted in the same manner. Seeing such a smart dog, the general praised it as a good soldier, and agreed to let Stubby stay in the camp. Soon after, the war broke out. Stubby accompanied Robert to the battlefield. The cruel war made the lively Stubby become quiet. Although it could not go into battle to kill enemies, it could still do what it could. It cleaned up the rats that came to steal food. The soldiers waited anxiously until dawn. Finally, they saw the first rays of dawn on the battlefield. Suddenly, the enemy launched a fierce bombardment. The soldiers were buried in the dirt. Stubby rushed over and dug desperately through the rubble. Then he let out a loud bark. The medics heard him and rushed over. The wounded soldier was successfully rescued and sent to the hospital. Surprisingly, this was only the beginning of Stubby's glorious achievements on the battlefield. Soon after, Robert and his comrades were assigned a reconnaissance mission to scout enemy positions. On the enemy's battlefield, they spotted numerous gas shells. The situation was urgent, and they needed to return immediately to report the news. However, an enemy soldier had already spotted them. Fortunately, Stubby noticed in time and pushed Robert to the ground, saving him from the enemy's fatal shot. But the gunfire startled the horse, and now only Stubby could run the fastest. So Robert took out his gas mask, and signaled Stubby to hurry back to camp to notify his comrades. Stubby didn't dare to slack off and immediately ran towards the camp. But before long, the enemy had already fired poison gas shells. The shells exploded in the air. The poison gas quickly began to spread. Just at this critical moment, Stubby finally returned to the camp. It ran quickly to the commander and bit the gas mask on the commander's waist. It barked anxiously. The commander understood its meaning. After putting on the gas mask, the commander hurriedly sounded the alarm to notify the soldiers. Immediately afterwards, Stubby returned to the rear camp and reminded the soldiers to put on their masks. The soldiers quickly understood what Stubby meant and immediately took precautions. When the poison gas reached the battlefield, the soldiers put on their gas masks in time and narrowly escaped disaster. However, the poison gas was slowly spreading towards the village behind them. Stubby hurried to the village again. and barked loudly at the sky in front of the villagers. The female villagers looked up at the sky, and saw the poison gas drifting toward them. They quickly put on their gas masks and closed the doors and windows. At this point, Robert and his comrades also returned safely. They took Stubby with them and hid in the stable. Unfortunately, Stubby did not have a gas mask. His comrades quickly came up with an idea, and covered Stubby's head with a wet towel. In the end, they all managed to avoid the enemy's poison gas. Once the poison gas had dissipated outside, the villagers all came to thank Stubby for saving their lives. Although the enemy's plot was foiled, the war did not end there. Soon, in another battle, the troops encountered a difficult problem. One of their comrades was trapped within the enemy's range of fire, and his life was in danger. Stubby did not hesitate. He jumped out of the trench without regard for his own safety, and ran toward the enemy under a hail of bullets. Stubby was fearless. He continued searching for his comrade's whereabouts. Fortunately, his efforts paid off. Stubby found his comrade in a nearby crater, but he was injured and unable to move. Stubby immediately barked toward the rear to request assistance. Upon receiving the exact coordinates, the commander immediately issued an order to launch smoke grenades. Under the cover of smoke, they successfully retrieved their comrade. Seeing Stubby's bravery, Robert was greatly relieved. From then on, Stubby became the topic of discussion among his comrades. He briefly became a role model for others. To thank Stubby for alerting them to the poison gas, they specially made him a military coat. His comrades also personally crafted a suitable gas mask for him. A few months later, the war had reached a critical stage. The enemy forces, desperate to survive, launched a large-scale offensive. During the battle, 3 enemy soldiers attempted to take advantage of the chaos to launch a surprise attack. Stubby decided to take the initiative and attack. He ran toward the enemy without regard for his own safety. By the time the enemy caught up with him, Robert and his men had already ambushed them. Working together, they successfully captured the 3 enemy soldiers. Just then, the enemy threw a grenade into the trench, injuring one of their comrades. As Robert raised his gun to retaliate, the enemy threw another grenade, which landed right in front of the injured comrade. At that moment, Stubby appeared in time, picking up the grenade with its mouth. With a loud explosion, Stubby fell to the ground motionless. Robert carried him back to camp quickly. He pleaded with the medic to take the dog to the field hospital for treatment, but the medic said, "It's just a dog. Don't waste my time." Robert exclaimed, "This dog has saved many comrades' lives." The medic felt deeply ashamed after hearing this, and sent Stubby back to the hospital with the other wounded soldiers. Since Stubby left, Robert has been like a lost soul. He often sees Stubby's shadow on the battlefield, but these are just hallucinations caused by his longing for Stubby. A few months later, Stubby's injuries have almost healed. He misses Robert very much, so he drags his still injured body, set off alone on the journey to find Robert. However, at that time, Robert had contracted a severe case of the flu, due to the harsh weather conditions. In his unconscious state, he repeatedly called out the dog's name. Stubby finally returned to the battlefield, only to find it had become a wasteland. He continued searching in the desolate area, but his weakened body eventually collapsed to the ground. Stubby tried to rise again with his resilient will, but in the end, he collapsed once more. Soon after, Robert awoke from his coma, and was surprised to find Stubby had returned safely. It turned out that a comrade had accidentally rescued Stubby during a patrol. At that moment, they embraced tightly. With Stubby by his side, Robert's condition began to improve. The terrible war was far from over, and Robert returned to the battlefield with Stubby once more. This time, Stubby smelled something unusual in the trench. He rushed forward and quietly hid behind the man. Then he bit down hard. When Robert and the others arrived, they discovered that it was an enemy spy. But fortunately, Stubby had spotted him in time, and his plan was foiled. Shortly after, Stubby followed the main force into battle again, successfully capturing the enemy's position. The enemy eventually surrendered, and the war finally ended. Due to Stubby's heroic actions, superiors decided to award him the honorary rank of sergeant, and Robert was awarded the rank of corporal.
Hey, Stubby, you outrank me now.
Stubby thus became the highest-ranking dog in the world, and his legend made headlines in the newspapers. A few weeks later, the troops returned home victorious. Countless people came out spontaneously to give their heroes a warm welcome, including the legendary dog, Stubby.